Yes, at last we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Let's Talk Inclusion. My name is Manobina Chakraborty. I'm an inclusive education consultant based in India. And my guest today is Ritika Sahni. Hi, Ritika. Welcome to Let's Talk Inclusion. And friends, in Let's Talk Inclusion, we generally invite expert professionals who are working to prepare differently able children and young people for the world. But today, our guest is an expert who is working to sensitize society to understand and include differently able people with open arms. Ritika is basically a musician and accomplished singer who is extremely passionate about diversity and inclusion. And she's also the proud founder and leader of Trinayani. Ritika, could you please tell our viewers a little more about your very special journey of life and, of course, about Trinayani?
Thank you so much, Manobina, for having me here. We had quite interesting fiasco. It's raining very heavily. I'm coming to you from Mumbai, and it is raining extremely heavily, so we have a huge issue with internet. My pranam, namaskar, and love to all your wonderful listeners and viewers of Let's Talk Inclusion. And thank you. You summed it up so well. You introduced me so well. So as you rightfully said, and I'm talking about India, if 10% of the population of our country are persons with disabilities, then 90% are those who are not disabled. And we all know that the decisions that are created are the ones created by the 90% who are not disabled. And somehow, if they are not aware of the capabilities, of the competencies, of the abilities, or of the realness of our friends with disability, they unknowingly, we are not playing a blame game. I think unknowingly, they exclude this entire community. So the journey of Trinayani, which I started in 2006, really started way back in 90 when I did my B.Ed in deaf education. And at the very onset, I started teaching children who were deaf going to regular schools. So I was an inclusive support teacher way back in the 90s. And I realized that, if you want inclusion to happen, then all the stakeholders have to be part of it. And by all, I mean everybody, people with and without disabilities. So at Trinayani, we design, curate events, workshops, poems, films, radio programs, everything which informs the non-disabled population of the country, gives them the appropriate information, that's very important, and the appropriate portrayal of persons with disabilities and their abilities, and how we highlight the differences, of course, but we also talk about the commonalities between us, because I think that's what's very important, that, you've named this abilities, diversities of abilities. And that's what I say, that, there is more than one way to talk, hear, walk, learn, work, speak. And we need to be able to understand that there is this huge world out there with amazing people all living different lives. And when you are mindful of each other's existence and circumstances, that's where empathy comes in. So everything that we do is to empower the non-disabled population of the country to open their hearts and their offices and their schools to include our friends with disabilities. Having said that, Manobina, I think it's also very important that just like the way you prepare the society to be, and I don't want to, categorize, but when you prepare non-disabled people to be inclusive and to kind of get people, you also have to prepare our disabled friends to become self-advocates, to speak the rights, to speak the human rights language, So simultaneously, both has to be done. So at Trinayani, as we make films. I have very, very, very recently launched our most ambitious project towards inclusion, disability awareness, Game Kit, specifically targeted for our non-disabled parents and friends and principals and teachers, to be able to get them to understand diversity as in disability, and to challenge the stereotypes that we often carry unknowingly about communities, and in my case, community, it's a community of people with disabilities.
Have to unmute myself first. Yeah, amazing, Ritika. Thank you very much for sharing all these things with us. And as you know, our topic of the show today is diversity of abilities. What comes to your mind when you hear this phrase?
I'm telling you, there's so much one has had to learn about online interaction, mute, unmute, etiquette, all that. So we're always learning. Manobina, when you talk about diverse abilities, to me, it includes all. It's a term that can be used with everyone. It basically focuses on the fact that we are all different, but able. That's what diversity of abilities mean. And as I said, it also, there are certain diversities, there are all kinds of diversities. There are certain diversities that you have no control over. You're born with it, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it is gender, race, national origin, religion. You're born with it. And then, of course, as I said in my introduction, you're talking about diversity of abilities as far as how people learn, how people grasp information, how people speak or communicate. There are various ways of communication. There are various ways of movement. There are various ways of listening. So as far as my space of disability awareness, disability is concerned, diverse abilities means different ways of doing the same thing.
This mute and unmute is something. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ritika. Actually, we are an overwhelmingly ableist society. That's what I feel. We see additional needs or maybe neurodivergence as a lack or absence that makes an individual inferior and keeps them from having a fulfilling life as defined by the mainstream values. We have internalized ableism as the norm and disability as a deviation. What do you feel? Has inclusion started taking place in India, or it's just at the concept phase till now?
Let's be honest, unity in diversity is a way of life in India. There is no denying that. And when you talk about inclusion, though unity in diversity is a way of life, their fears, prejudices, and attitudes, as you rightfully said, do push certain people to the edges of the community. There is no denying that. It does, people are oppressed not just because of disability. It could be, refugees, or because of your sexual orientation, because of your beliefs, because of your race. So there is discriminatory attitudes can be disabling to many, many people. It's a different matter that I personally work through Trinayani in the space of disability awareness. Now, having said that, as you said, is inclusion happening? I always like to be slightly positive about things. That diversity and inclusion has become an international mandate as far as corporate world is concerned. So there is no denying that there are offices and corporates who are opening their spaces for employees with disability. They are recognizing employees with disability as an alternative source of workforce. Whether it is Infosys or Dell or Accenture or Cognizant or State Bank of India, many private firms are including people with disabilities. Train, for example, trains people with disabilities for the retail industry. So I have myself curated and designed workshops for Indigo Airlines, for Air India, for Yes Bank, for Bangalore Airport, for L'Oreal, among other places. So it's, inclusion as a concept is very context specific. it's not, you don't have a, there is no definition of what inclusion is all about. It's a philosophy. It's not a place. It's a journey. It's an attitude. So I know of schools, for example, they don't have their teachers sent for training. The teachers have learned on the job. They've got themselves trained because they want to, because they intrinsically feel that the classroom has to be open for all. There has to be diversities of abilities represented in their classrooms. So I think it's an attitude. If your heart is in the right place, then inclusion happens, as simple as that. So it's not a concept. Of course it's happening. It's not happening as much as it should. That's because of various reasons, and I'm sure we'll come to that.
Yeah, actually, India is what I feel is India is a huge country, and we are very much preoccupied with issues like caste and religion and food habits and rituals and faith and many others. So we are aware of our cultural and religious diversities, regional diversities as well, but we are yet to be aware of the diversity of abilities in that to that extent rather. Uh, so, how do you think meaningful inclusion across abilities can be achieved in a society like ours?
Manobina, the answer is education. There is no other way out. It's education that allows you to get information and knowledge about diverse groups. It also allows you to diversify on the way. And in the last 1 year, while we've been part of the lockdown and pandemic, I've had to present a lot of paper, talk to a lot of people, and I've done a lot of reading and thinking about citizenship. And I've come to the opinion that, as you rightfully said, people are aware of various other diversities, but they're not that aware about diversities of abilities. And it is only this unawareness or this lack of understanding comes from the fact that you don't go to school with them. You do not work with people with disabilities. You don't even live alongside someone with a disability. Or even if you're living, years go by and you don't know that your neighbor and your neighbor's parent could be a CEO of a company, but you don't know that the son has a disability. So that's how we live. So I think it all boils down to education, because education is also a means towards citizenship. And what do I mean by that? Being a citizen is not about reading and writing. It's not about that. It's about understanding that you're living as a part of a community, and you have the responsibility of ensuring that you're welcoming other people into that community. Citizenship is not about having a passport. Responsible citizens are those who are aware of the issues that impact their society. They're not only aware of issues and handle issues that maybe affect them, but they go out of their way to try and look into the issues that seemingly are happening to others. And that's where empathy comes in. How does empathy come in? You have to intellectually commit to understanding the predicament, the differences, the problems that somebody else is facing. That's very, very important. And it all boils down to teaching our children, our parents, citizenship values. It sounds very odd, Manobina, but we teach our children to be competitive. We don't teach them to be collaborative. Consideration, to be considerate, unfortunately, cannot be assumed now. It has to be taught. To be considerate is something that we need to teach our children. So education is the answer. Now, education, when you're talking about education, it's a very interesting thing. How does meaningful inclusion happen? It happens in two ways. One is people generally, or everybody needs to be educated about diversity. Everybody needs to be educated that if you have certain privileges, if you're born with certain privileges, then they have to be taught that you need to use those privileges not only to become a better person and better your life, but you also need to use your privileges to right wrong. And you need to do it every day. You need to use your privileges for those backbenchers. We need to teach this to our students. Again, other aspect of it is that meaningful inclusion will happen when you will have children with disabilities in classrooms, so that the stereotyping that happens will get diffused when everybody is in a classroom together. They're failing, or they're laughing, or they are eating, they are in the playground. Everything is happening together. So I think education, very, very important, and through education, to teach our children the values of values of being considerate. Are we?
And is
Did you get the last
yeah,
part?
yes, yes. And since we haven't sensitized our children as yet, our children and for that matter, the society itself tend to use problematic terminology in referring to different abilities, and there is almost zero integration or accessibility in public spaces, mainstream schools, and higher education institutions. As I said earlier, Ritika, we have actually internalized ableism as the norm and different ability as a deviation, and that's why maybe we use so problematic all those problematic terminologies. And of course, it seeps into the stories we tell our children. If we talk about children's literature, Ritika, or any other media for that matter, representation of persons with additional needs is highly marginalized. What do you think about it?
You know, Manobina, I've been thinking about, I've been part of so many talks, and there are so many questions that are posed to me. And I always feel that each question it leads into the other, and the answer of everything is actually is actually education. Because now, when you talk about education, as far as directors are concerned, now if directors decide to use a character with a disability in a film, and they're very well aware that that film will be watched by crores of people in the country, then it is their responsibility, again, using that privilege, it is their responsibility to do enough research to be able to show the appropriate portrayal, so that the already the beliefs, the prejudices, the stereotypes that we have in our mind doesn't get reiterated, the wrong stereotypes in our mind. So it is a job of the filmmaker to challenge stereotypes, that hey, this is what you thought, but that actually this is what's happening. Media is very important, because media, of course, as you rightfully said, apart from our families and our schools, the third most important influence in everybody's life all over the world is the media, because media gives us knowledge, it educates us. And I was doing a bit of a research, because I went to LA to do a very interesting, to be part of a very interesting conference called Disability and Media, and there was this gentleman called Jenny. There was a quote that I got there. The quote is from 1991. It's 1991. This is 2021. But when I read this quote, you will see that how true it is even today. There is a need for reality in the portrayal of PWs in the media. Such an important thing. You need to portray people with disabilities as real people who have friendships, who are educated, who fall in love, or who have children, who have sexual relationships, and you need to kind of give that image instead of always portraying the person. Why can't a person with a disability also be a lawyer? Are you very worried whether the lawyer is dark or fair? No. So you can always have a person with a disability who's a lawyer, and you don't need to worry about whether he's on a wheelchair or he's blind. All you need to worry about is that he's a lawyer, and he, of course, has the capabilities of being a lawyer. Now, as you rightfully said, what's happening in our let me give you an example of two films. So I don't know whether you saw a film called Black, which portrayed deaf blindness in our country. And then there was this film called Zero, which portrayed cerebral palsy. And people from the disability sector were not very happy with the portrayal. They were not very happy. But on the other hand, I happened to watch a Marathi film called Yellow. And in the cast was a person, adult with Down syndrome, playing herself. So it was a young adult from Pune with Down syndrome playing herself in yellow And it was such a wonderful film. And I loved the fact that it was subtitled, you know, because it was Marathi, they subtitled it so I could watch it. But a Hindi film is not subtitled, which gets me to another thing about media and disability. In one hand, you're talking about the portrayal of disability on media, but I would also like to question and give you two more important aspects of media and disability, Manobina. One is, why is it that you don't cast disabled actors for roles which has disability? Number two, whenever you are talking about the media, why is it that the person with disability is always the subject of the media and not the consumer? So you are never thinking of, you are never thinking of subtitling or captioning or audio description for our blind friends, because if you treat them as consumers, they're going to get your business. You have to treat them as someone who will get your business. So if you take care of things like subtitling and audio description and captioning, then you also get your persons with disabilities to kind of add to your kitty. Number four, whenever you're talking about, let's say, a panel, if there's a panel of speakers, how come you won't think of calling a person with disability to talk about politics or cricket or nuclear bombs or the politics of America or vaccination? Why is it that you always call someone with a disability only to talk about disability? So, there it is too deep rooted. It is too deep rooted, and we really, really have to. There needs to be an earthquake in our heads and in our minds, and we need to kind of we need to kind of completely uproot our thoughts and our attitudes about what we think a person with disability or what we think living with a disability is, because that's not what it is. I have so many friends with disabilities, and I have, so for example, I have just recently, 3 young girls have started helping us, 3 young girls from a certain school. And I was talking to another friend of mine who's a wheelchair user, and I was kind of actually, no, not here. This was before the lockdown. On one of the meetup, I told a friend of mine, "Thoda coffee leke aana." Very casually, I told this friend of mine who's on a wheelchair, "Jaake coffee leke aana." You should have seen the faces of my other friends. That how could you speak to someone who's on a wheelchair and ask her to get coffee? I said, but she's a friend of mine. Would I think twice about telling somebody to get me coffee if the person didn't have a disability? So, so it's so deep-rooted that someone with a disability, you have to, I would rather you be careful about your behavior with someone with a disability and the language that you use, rather than think about, normalizing relationships and behaviors is also very important. You don't need to be worried about saying, "Have you seen this?" to someone who's blind, because of course she's seen it. They see differently. You don't have to worry about saying, "Have you heard this?" to someone who's deaf, because of course they hear differently. So it's too deep rooted, Manobina. But I think it's not bleak. We are taking small steps. Schools are opening up to inclusion. And there are films that I know have hired a sign language, a deaf instructor, because the character was going to do sign language. So there are people who are waking up to the possibility that as citizens we have responsibilities and we can't take it so lightly.
Yeah, actually, I also think that our storytellers are overwhelmingly privileged, and that bias is showing to some extent. Suppose we are sitting here and discussing about inclusion in media, but we are so-called non-disabled and neurotypical. So many like us, our friends maybe, they might not be able to portray a protagonist who is differently able. And as you correctly said, the protagonist in the film Yellow, since she is differently abled herself, and maybe that is the reason the true representation took place in that film. And
Manobina, I do want to say something to you because you've used this term so many times in this conversation. You are referring to people with disabilities systemically as differently abled. Just before I started a conversation with you, there was a conversation happening on a WhatsApp group about this terminology of differently abled. And I do want to, since we have so many people listening to us, I do want to mention this to you that, people with disabilities are differently abled, of course. That's because all of us are differently abled. And since people with disabilities are also a part of all, they're differently abled. But referring to people with disabilities as only differently abled is really not. I won't say correct. It doesn't give the correct portrayal, because supposing I was getting somebody to your house for lunch and all I told you was I'm getting somebody who's differently abled. Do you get any information? No, you don't get any information.
I will ask you about him. How
No.
differently is he?
No, I see. I think what happens is, everybody, you, me, everybody who's watching and listening to our conversation is differently abled. But people with disabilities, I mean, I'm telling you this because I've had people with disabilities as my friends, and they say that we're not ashamed of our disability, and we have no problem being called blind or deaf or disabled people, because don't take away that from us. Don't take away my disability from me by just calling me differently able. I'm just sharing something that has come to me from so many people with disabilities, that, hey, I'm calling me differently able, but please remember I'm a person with disability, that I'm a disabled person.
Yeah, that is true. But at the same time, the way you asked your wheelchair user friend to get a cup of coffee for you, and your other friends were surprised,
Huh.
and you said that yes, she can do. Or someone who is blind, he can see in a different way. Someone who is has hearing impairment, he can hear, but in a different way. So I also think the same way, and that is why I really do not use the word disabled, because I believe that a deaf person can hear differently, a blind person can see differently, and that is why I always use differently able. But yes, I will keep whatever you said that in mind.
No,
And
but
we will,
you're right. Monobina, you're absolutely right. From the field, please understand, you are the converted, you are already working in the sector. The problem is not you using it, because you know why you're using it. You're very well aware of why you're using it. What happens is, when you have regular non-disabled people getting very upset that no, please do not use the word differently abled. They have no friends with disability. They don't go to school. They don't go to the pub. They will not go for a walk with someone with a disability. But all that they know is that they are not supposed to call them
use this. Yeah,
disabled. You're supposed to call them
yeah, that's right.
disabled. That's what I'm coming from there. Of course, you're from the field, so you're aware. You're aware why you're saying it. You have the logic for it. That's very important, because I think what happens, just like, and now that you mentioned terminology, you're talking about so many people, even in the press, in the print, in the media, you have wheelchair bound. The person is wheelchair bound. Despite being wheelchair bound, he has achieved so much. So there you have, either you are suffering, or you're a sorrowful figure, or you're a superhero and you've achieved a lot. And not understanding that just by using a wheelchair user, you're completely changing the image. The image, we have images. Words give us images in our heads. And if you use the right word, the imagery in your head changes. And again, it boils down to education.
Yeah, and as you know, that my area of work is actually inclusive education for children and young people. So I'm curious to know your definition and idea of inclusive education.
Manobina, from the time I have launched the game kit, which is called Towards Inclusion, the game kit also comes with a workshop titled Towards Inclusion. And what I talk about in that workshop is more the answer to your question. That I'm always talking about, as I mentioned earlier, that inclusive education is context specific, best practices. There is no inclusion can happen in is happening in different ways in different places. But for me, inclusive education will be strengthening. That would be my definition. That you strengthen the education system to respond to diversities in learners. It is a strengthening of the educational system. It is inclusive teaching practices, capacity building and empowerment of our stakeholders, whether parents or teachers or peons or drivers or gardener in a school, to be able to understand and of how they will react to diversity of their learners. So it all really, for me, it boils down to the attitudes of our friends without disabilities. Um, you know, inclusive education would be, in very simple terms, a classroom where everybody belongs. Everybody belongs. Everybody participates. They're just not there, because that becomes dumping. You're dumping someone with it. They're not there. They are participating. They are contributing. They are being part and parcel of everything. The entire curriculum, access to the full curriculum, is where inclusion will happen. So I think that's. But primarily, I think it is strengthening, it is empowering, it is capacity building of the education system to respond to diversity in learners. That is what inclusive education means to me. Because we can have all kinds of definitions, but you are aware of the national education policy. It talks very clearly about homeschooling, about special education, and about neighborhood schools. And thankfully, it also talks about disability awareness in teacher education and student education. Because you just can't, we can't complain about why schools are not being inclusive if you are not strengthening and empowering them with enough knowledge, enough strategies to include. Having said that, Manobina, as I told you earlier, I know of schools who just decided, attitudinal-wide decided, whoever's going to walk through that door, I will admit. And the rest follows. Because if your attitude is if your heart is in the right place, the rest, be assured, will follow, because there are so many people, including you, founder of I for Inclusion, who will be there to help. You see, you want to include, all right, I can do this session. These people can do this session. That's why the game kit has been created. The game kit has been created so that the academic community understands the broad spectrum of disability. And Manobina, I must tell you here that Trinayani works across disabilities. Since we talk about attitudes, we are talking about values, we are talking about attitudes towards the entire spectrum of disability. So I hope I've answered the question.
Do you want me to show the video, the game kit video, which
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah, just a minute.
I would love that.
Our Towards Inclusion Disability Awareness card game kit includes 6 thrilling card games, a story-cum workbook, and an answer booklet. Packed in a durable, attractive cardboard box, the game kit has been developed over 2 years of extensive research and pilot study and is highly recommended for all, especially the academic community. The box cover features relevant information about the kit. It features the 6 card games, describing them in one quirky line, the Trinayani logo, we urge you to visit our website to know more about us, and the Towards Inclusion logo, which features in all the card games. At the back, you have the acknowledgements, and we are truly indebted to many. It mentions the names of Ritika, Sahni and Padma Shastri who developed the kit, and a little note on Trinayani and about the game kit. Let's open the box. You will first see the I Am Different, So Are You workbook, which has an original story titled Nancy's Move to Delhi. And it also has worksheets like the crossword puzzle or the maze, which have all been developed specially for children. And then you have the 6 card games, which lend itself to repeated play. You've got Do You Know, Say This Not That, Barrier Begone, Here, Inclusion Bingo, Surprise, Surprise, of course the bingo sheets. Now, being a new topic for almost everybody in our society, we may not be equally familiar with the subject matter of disability, and therefore we have provided answer keys and explanations to understand the basic concepts and new terminologies that we have used in the cards. Participants can access it and at some point of time can be encouraged to challenge themselves and play the games without the answer keys. Each card pack displays a brief note explaining the purpose of the game. It is important for you to read this note before you start playing the game to understand the individual areas of disability awareness being covered. When played with students and children, teachers and parents should read it aloud to them. Each box also contains an instruction sheet which is to be read carefully, and remember to keep it back in the box. So this was the unboxing of Trinayani's Towards Inclusion Disability Awareness card game kit. You had the answer booklet, you had the bingo sheet, you had the 6 card games. Surprise, surprise, barrier be gone, do you know, here, here, inclusion bingo, say this, not that, and the story come workbook, I am different, so are you. You can write to us for your copy at ritika@trinayani.org. It costs 1,500 rupees, which is inclusive of shipping. Grab your kit right now. It's the perfect way to encourage family time and togetherness.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And I would also like to know more about it. Yeah, please carry on.
It took us almost 2.5 years to create this kit. Can you hear me, Manobina?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. And the entire idea of the kit is to impart values, to be able to familiarize. First of all, it has to be used like any other game, like Scrabbles or like Monopoly or like Uno. You're simply playing to win. But while you are playing, we noticed while we were doing the pilot studies with people across ages, we did it with play therapists and principals and grandparents and educationists and students. When they get down to playing the game, it's all about winning. But there are times when repeated play, it's about this whole thing you said about internalizing this ableism that we internalize, to internalize the fact that diversity is beautiful. It brings variety to life. It adds value to life. It's so important. So I think the game kit, and as I told you earlier, for schools, especially for educational organizations across the country or the world, I conduct a paid Towards Inclusion workshop, after which they get 2 kits for free. So that's anybody who wants to get in touch. I'm sure can write to me on Ritika@trinayani.org.
And I would also like to know more about your other endeavors to make our society ready for true inclusion.
The one thing that you will be very interested in, Manobina, is because that was again the first of its kind in the country. In 2015 and 16, for an entire academic year, I designed, curated, and conducted all kinds of workshops and programs for 4 Delhi public schools across the country, because it was their annual theme. The annual theme was celebrating diversity. The difference is in knowing. And which meant I was designing lessons for their history lessons, disability awareness lessons within their history topic, within their geography subject, within their robotics, annual day, annual function, assembly. So that one year, we did nothing else because we were completely immersed in doing workshops for teachers, for parents, for ancillary staff, for bus conductors, because they are the first point of contact when you have someone coming to school. And this game kit also, the idea of the game kit came while we were doing this 1-year program, because we said, how else do you get people to be learning about diversity and disability without really a lecture or a let me read out something to you. So as I told you, we have these awareness booklets, and there is this beautiful awareness booklet, the PDF of which can be downloaded by anybody from our website. It's free, a free downloadable PDF. It says what's normal. Everybody has something they can't do. That's a disability. You can't control your anger. That's your disability. I can't walk. That's mine. You can't play chess. That's your disability. I can't see. That's mine. You can't keep your formulae straight in your head. That's your disability. I can't keep my head straight. That's mine. Everybody has abilities they can boast about. You can't sing well. You can sing well. That's your ability. I can foot paint. That's mine. You can play cricket. That's your ability. I can play the violin. That's mine. You can make friends easily. That's your ability. I can be a good friend. That's mine. We are all disabled in some ways, and we are all others. So what's normal? You are as normal as you can be, and so am I. So we read a lot of poems. There's another poem called I Am Special, So Are You, that we got included in the CBSE curriculum of class 10 of English communicative course. So for 3 to 4 years, every child who had English communicative course in class 10 in CBSE had this poem. We have a radio show on disability. We did 3 seasons on All India Radio. The last season was broadcast in 17 cities in the country. And it was called Murmur Ke Na Dekh. So in Hindi, Murmur Ke Na Dekh means don't look back. And it had 2 meanings. For with disability, it says, don't look back. What's happened? Look forward and see what you will do with your life, what you're going to make of your life. And for non-disabled people, it said, just don't keep staring at people with disabilities. I mean, there is no, it's not like you can stare with a curiosity, you can go and speak to them, but don't stare for the sake of staring. So Murmur Ke Na Dekh was broadcast in 17 cities in the country. We also regularly make short films, and they're all channel. I wish with my name you had given the website, then the people would have known the Trinayani website. I suppose you can let them know when they write to you.
Yes.
So Trinayani.org.
Posted on the comment section.
I can't hear you. So okay, so there are we have a YouTube channel, Manobina. We have a YouTube channel of Trinayani, NGO Trinayani, and all our films are there. So even the film that you showed is from the YouTube channel. This poem, I Am Special, So Are You, has been made into a film. People, now you're more than welcome to have see the film. So we make films, and as a consultant and trainer in disability inclusion, I curate and design workshops for schools, for corporate sectors, for anybody who wants it. So they could be bus conductors of Panjim, they could be nurses of Tata Memorial Hospital, they could be anybody. They could be film Training Institute, it could be anybody. So everybody needs to become aware and sensitive about what it is like to lead different lives. You have any questions that are coming up? From
in the comment section? No, not really. Ritika, I would like to show another video here and would like to know more about it from you later on. Should I?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
जिसका जिगर पे लगाए चोट, जिसके जाने से बम फटे एटम बम हो जाए विस्फोट, चांद बेबी है आई आशिकों की है शामत याफत है चांद बेबी है आई कयामत है
वाह 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 वाह
आशिकों में जिसका टाइटैनिक आशिकों में जिसका टाइटैनिक हुआ किनारा दिखा करके हुआ दे गया झल्ला मेरा आशिक झल्ला वल्ला मेरा बलमा झल्ला वल्ला मेरा झल्ला वल्ला वल्ला हमने समझा था गोल्डन जुबली जिसे समझा हमने था गोल्डन जुबली जिसे वो तो नटनी दिखा करके चुमा ले गया अल्लाह मेरा आशिक झल्ला वल्ला मेरा बलमा झल्ला वल्ला मेरा झल्ला वल्ला वल्ला ओ भीतर भीतर आग लगे बात करूं तो सेस लगे आज भीतर भीतर आग लगे बात करूं तो सेस लगे ओ मैं चांद निकल गई दैया रे अंग में ऐसे छाल पड़े करूं तो का करूं सी करती सी करती मैं मरूं जबाब पे लगा रे जबाब पे लगा रे नमक इसका है तेरे इसका जबाब लगा रे नमक इसका है तेरे इसका जबाब लगा रे बलम से मांगा रे बलम से मांगा रे बलम इसका है तेरे इसका इसका है तेरे इसका जबाब लगा रे नमक इसका है तेरे इसका है तेरे
Yeah, it's so nice, so great. It was really amazing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. So,
Yeah, would
so
you like to
Manobina,
tell us?
as a musician, I'm also a singer, and
Yeah.
I always say I'm so fortunate to be able to pursue both my passions, that of being a musician and that of being a disability campaigner. And Pehli Barish is the band where I combine both. So my friends, all my friends who were playing here were friends with the varying degrees of visual impairment, and we perform as part of it's a Trinayani band. They all are regular performers, and they have their own lives and their livelihoods, and they're very busy musicians. But they join Trinayani and me, and we perform at times. I must tell you something, and I must tell you how it started. So Pehli Barish actually started as a band which performed, and I'm so happy that we've done about 25 free shows. So once a month, starting June. It's called Pehli Barish, so it starts in June. In Bombay, the monsoon starts in June. So from June to December, every month, we used to perform for other NGOs, and it could be any NGO. It doesn't have to do with disability. So we performed for inmates for our residents of the jail. We performed for old age homes. We performed for cancer survivors. So again, it is our awareness generating initiative of Trinayani, where I tell people that people with disabilities also give back to society. They're just not receivers. They're just not receivers of support. They're also givers. And Pehli Barish, by doing that, we constantly change. That's a nice question. How would you deal with the stigma that is still there in families in rural India, the awareness of counseling? I'll come to that. So, and while we were doing these monthly free pro bono shows for our friends, some of them said, would you like to perform, like commercially? And so we said, why not? I mean, while we are giving back, we don't mind receiving. So that's how we also, it's very funny, but during the lockdown, we performed in December through Zoom. Through Zoom, we performed for Walmart. As a group, as Pehli Barish, we also did a small performance for an international conference, Pehli Barish. So it's one of our initiatives, and it's called Pehli Barish because we want people to get that refreshing feeling of the first rain when they listen to us.
And very great initiatives, honestly. And would you like to sing a couple of lines of the song you wrote, composed, and sang for Infusion?
Yes, of course. It's called Sabki Hai Dharti, and it was written for CBM, and the music video is available on YouTube, and it was also created for CBM. So it's called Sabki Hai Dharti, Sabka Hai Asman, Sabki Hai Dharti, Sabka Hai Asman. हमें भी दो अधिकार, हमारा भी है ये जहान. हमें भी दो अधिकार, हमारा भी है ये जहान. हमारी ये चाह पूरी हो जाए. So this is someone with a disability, children with disability saying, हमारी ये चाह पूरी हो जाए, सबके साथ हम स्कूल में जाए, नाचे गाए खेले कूदे, सानिया सचिन बन जाए. सबकी है धरती, सबका है आसमान, हमें भी दो अधिकार, हमारा भी है ये जहान. मौका दो, शामिल करो, धीरज तुम दिखाओ. That's what we want. Opportunity, inclusion, patience. मौका दो, शामिल करो, धीरज तुम दिखाओ. अपना बनाओ हमें, तरस न खाओ. देश के निवासी हम, हमें दूर ना हटाओ. Again, I've talked about citizenship in my song, that we are citizens of this country. We don't need your pity, we don't need your sympathy, we need our rights. The fundamental right for education is for all. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Education is for all, and it has to be made real in our country. In reality, it has to become.
Thank you so much, Ritika. It was indeed a treat to the ears of the soul.
Thank you
And
so much.
before we conclude today's session, any suggestion, advice for our viewers who are mostly parents and teachers of schools?
It is only when we are very, very young are we so impressionable. The age is so impressionable that we should be able to citizens, parents, caregivers, and adults, Manobina, have to be very careful about how they speak, what they speak, and even their gaze, their look, because children subconsciously observe and learn by observation. So I would urge all my friends, irrespective of who they are, to be very careful about what you speak, how you speak, and how you look at people. And I'm talking about, and I'm sure people have understood, I'm talking about everything, because children so subconsciously imbibe things, and that's and then they grow with those values. So we have to be very careful. As far as parents of children with disabilities are concerned, I would say do not overprotect, do not underutilize your child's capabilities. Do not worry about what someone with a parent who doesn't have a disabled child says or looks or tells you. You are responsible for your child, and you should not be overwhelmed by anybody's comments. That's very, very important. And independence should be every parent's motto, to have the child become independent in skills, in activities. And for that, it's important, even if you have to be cruel and unkind, that's all right, because you are responsible. Nobody has anything else to say. So, finally, it's the parents who will be responsible for their child. And having talked about inclusive education, Manobina, I think every parent has a right to decide how they want their child to be educated, because homeschooling is definitely an option, even with children who are not disabled. I know of so many of my friends who have not sent their children to schools. They are homeschooling their children. So it can be an option for many parents. And for the rest of the society, सोच को बदलो तो व्यवहार बदलेगा. You have to change your mindset and your attitude, and your actions will change. So
Thank you very much, Ritika. And I for inclusion.
I can't hear you. Sorry, Manobina, I think I've lost you. At least it's not happening. It's happening at the end of the show. Hello. So on behalf of Trinayani and I for Inclusion, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I hope you've heard this. Thank you, and